Hello horror fans and welcome to another edition of Silver Screams. Today we are talking about Gravity Falls Season 2, Episode 14, The Stanchurian Candidate.
What a great episode.
This was a really great episode. It had a really good balance of silliness and serious plot, but at the same time never felt too heavy. It was a little bit borderline with the whole possession thing.
But it was a good balance episode after we had like a Tale of Two Stands and stuff like that to kind of work with.
But at the same time, it wasn't as off-the-wall silly as Dungeons, and More Dungeons.
Yes, but that was wonderful.
Move things forward, and I really appreciated that.
We did have a really good special guest voice, though.
That may be... Okay, we both agree.
Everyone who's like, who? The guy that everyone loved, the black-haired dude?
Tad Strange.
Tad Strange.
Oh, Tad.
Cecil Baldwin.
For those of you who don't know, Cecil Baldwin is the main actor in a podcast series called Welcome to Night Vale, which if you haven't listened to it, first of all, where have you been for like the last 2 years, 3 years?
Not listening to podcasts, evidently.
Clearly. Because it was it like became, what was it, a year and a half ago? It became like the #1 downloaded podcast because everybody just wanted to know what the heck it was.
Essentially, if you like Gravity Falls, you will really like Welcome to Night Vale. It's like NPR from the Twilight Zone, but it definitely amps up the creepy. Like,
oh yeah, no, it's
way more so than Gravity Falls.
We were talking about it to a friend earlier, and it's far more esoteric than Gravity Falls is.
Well, and it's very atmospheric and very creepy. And Cecil has a really nice, deep radio voice. And so just him talking about the stuff like, yeah, and I like bread. It's just one of those
I'm the most normal guy there is. Which, okay.
And we're like, it's Cecil!
Can we both agree that this is like our favorite part of the episode?
Yes.
My only
just his random, you look good today, coming from you.
That means so much, Tad. My only complaint is that I want him to be a staple of Gravity Falls now, and it was a fantastic cameo, but I want him to be there forever now. I don't want this show to continue unless he's a regular cast member.
I don't think we're going to get that in the same way I don't think we're going to get Weird Al Wizard to come back.
But that was a gem. That was so special. But yeah, I love... Night Vale's great, and Cecil's great, and anytime he said anything this episode, it was just like a treat. Every line was just a joy.
That voice, man.
But something I wasn't quite expecting was Gideon coming back. I mean, we knew it was going to happen. I didn't think it was going to happen in this episode, though. I don't really quite know what I expected from this episode, except for political hijinks.
I would have been very happy if Gideon just disappeared into the ether at some point, never to return. Because I just don't like him. And and obviously that's the point as a character, but there's a big difference between Bill freaking Cipher showing up, who you know, he's the series big bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
He is. And then Gideon showing up with his really super creepy consent issues and just the whole...
He's meant to be skin-crawlingly creepy, though.
Yes. We're not quite at the point where comeuppance would be unwelcome, because there are some characters where they just get so horrendously, awfully bad. You just want them to absolutely disappear. You don't even want them to die or get an awful comeuppance, because that's too dramatic and too much attention on them. You just want them to disappear. We're talking about the villain from the second arc of Sword Art Online. We're talking about Ramsay Bolton. We're talking about villains like that, where they're so bad, where you just want them to just be gone.
Yeah,
and that would be great. And that's the best possible resolution, is for them just to...
And that's I think where a lot of content creators get confused, is they think that if they build up characters like the guy from SAO, like the second arc of Sword Art Online, during the Alfheim arc.
Name?
Does it remember? Todd
Pretty much, you know, he'll see this video and be like,
He was calling himself Oberyn the Fairy King, but that wasn't his real name. So let's just call him Oberyn. But yeah,
Capricorn. We like Todd. Todd's a lovely
Your
human
Royal
being.
Majesty
His
Todd
Royal Majesty
Habercorn.
Todd Epic Habercorn. Yeah.
But no, there's this confusion that if you build up a character like that, especially when it comes to, I'll go ahead and say it straight up, like sexual assault, there's this misconception that like the more awful you make them, the more gratifying their comeuppance will be, the more gratifying their death will be. That's not necessarily true. Yes, you want a good villain to have a good comeuppance, but with villains like that, it's not worth it. It's genuinely not worth the trip to get there. And
it's a line crossed.
And it's also a kind of violence begets violence things, and I'll probably talk about this at some point in terms of Last House on the Left, but one of the kind of statements I suppose that movie makes is, you know, when violence begets violence, what are you left with? And like, it's, some people see it as like, woo, revenge, but that's not the point. The point is that a horrible people meeting a horrible end doesn't necessarily give you a happy ending.
And it really depends on your villain execution. Like, we've been watching Red versus Blue, and you have Locus and Felix, and they are these awful, horrendous people with massive body counts to their names, but they're charismatic, they're interesting, and you know it's very much established that, yeah, these are not good human beings, but it's not in that ugly, disgusting sort of fashion where you start getting into the Ramsay Bolton area of life. There, you still want to see them go down, and you still want to see them get absolutely run over by the good guys. And they're the kind of villains where that's going to be fun, and that's going to be interesting, and you're looking forward to the eventual comeuppance.
Exactly.
As opposed to the type of villains where you just want them to disappear because it is so emotionally agonizing and draining just to sit through them being on screen. And in a different... If this were a different show, if this were more adult, if it were gritty, I say this as it's a terrifying children's show, but if it were executed...
It's still on Disney.
Yeah.
You know.
If it were executed differently, Gideon would be that kind of villain by this point.
Yeah, because it's a children's show.
They've shown that, like, you imagine him as an adult, he would be that kind of villain if he continues along this same trajectory. But because of how they execute it, he's closer to towing the line than I'd like, just because of the creepy obsession with Mabel, but the show has done a very good job as framing that as incredibly raw.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're not going to push Gideon into that, please just disappear, we're so disgusted with you.
Yeah, for me it hasn't crossed that line yet. They're doing a really good job of making him a good villain, but not making me want to turn off the TV. And so for me,
I have the potential to go that way, but they're not going to.
Oh no, they won't do that. Again, because I trust the writers of this show. For one, I trust that they know what they're doing.
We trust the writers of Gravity Falls.
Of course we do.
That's terrifying.
In comparison to
the writers of Game of Thrones.
In comparison to the writers of other adult shows.
Game of Thrones.
Or even when you try to do a Last House on the Left remake, you missed the point because you're trying to be cool. I don't know for sure if this is true, but a friend of mine and I were talking about Hannibal the series, which I haven't watched, but she actually was making a comment about it because I was doing a rant about another horror movie that resorted to that sort of thing and how much I hate that. And she was like, you know what, the creators of that show straight up said that they would never cross that line. Not because their show isn't dark, because it certainly is, but because there's no way to properly present it in a short form medium. And you have to give them a lot of credit for being able to admit that they don't have the level of skill in order to properly execute that in a way that shows the real life consequences of it. So even if you don't like Hannibal, you have to hand it to the writers on that. So that's awesome.
I just keep thinking of the fans who were so upset that Hannibal was a villain. Like, my favorite comeback for that was, like, why are they making him a villain? My favorite reply to that was, he eats people.
Also,
have you been
he's the
bad guy? Oh, it's named after him and he's so charismatic. The conversations about Chef Ramsay having a dinner at his house and Hannibal just starting to freak out more and more when he can't give a satisfying answer to, so what's in this dish? Anyway,
I'm gonna have to watch Hannibal at some point. Anyway,
way the heck off topic.
Getting back
I brought
to
this
Gideon.
down a very dark road.
It's
worth discussing.
That's what I mean.
It's
Horror. That is
horror.
sadly that is actually a huge component of the horror genre, and one of my big criticisms of this genre that I love is that often it crosses that line under the guise of are we being so gritty and edgy and
aggressive.
And or just like this is the most horrible thing we can think of, like isn't it horrifying? It's like yes, but not for the reasons that you think.
Yeah.
So anyway, again, that is the content for another video for another day. Believe me, I will get to those because there are lots of movies I want to talk about that do those things. But anyway, back to Gideon.
Bleeding taxidermy flavor of horror over here. Ancient sins.
So good.
God, this show.
Anyway, back to Gideon. I really appreciate, first of all, Stephen Root as like his dad is just fantastic and wonderful in everything he's in. Shame on you, other show that I won't mention that killed off his character recently. I'm very upset with you. But I won't say which show it is because that's a spoiler. Anyway.
Do I watch it?
No, you don't. But anyway, I'm very upset with you, other show that I won't mention. But it's so funny to hear him put on this character. It's so funny. I recently watched an episode of King of the Hill again, and so it was just fun to hear his voice, to hear his character come back. And I gotta say, probably the two most disturbing moments of this episode was when Gideon possessed his father, just that initial moment, and then because he saved a page of the book
in his hair.
I mean, that's a good place to keep
You'd
it.
think he had enough product in, for one, when the hell did he plan ahead that far? And for two, you'd think he'd had enough product in his hair to dissolve it.
I guess he probably just from, like, for a long time, he's just had that one in his hair as a contingency plan. It's not, I'm guessing he's just had it there for the longest time.
Again, back to, he would have had enough product in his hair to dissolve it.
Well, if you notice, as soon as he got into prison, he started wearing a hairnet. So keep it in there that way.
But if he'd had it for a long time, again, the dissolving of the
doesn't matter. Anyway, it's a cartoon. Anyway,
it builds things to last.
Anyway, but the other really creepy part, and again, I'm a huge like fan of the mind control and like possession tropes, but like seeing Seuss react to having been temporarily possessed is it's actually probably one of the most genuine reactions to that sort of thing I've ever seen in any show, and I really appreciate
my light
it.
flash before my eyes. Well, and Mabel also made him eat a pine cone.
That wasn't very
which is
nice.
bad for you.
I mean, it's Seuss. He'll bounce back. I'm sure he's eaten worse.
But that's still just like
no.
I don't know what happened there, but I don't like it.
I will say that again, the only other thing I'm disappointed by, and yeah, I use disappointed in loose terms. The only other thing I'm quote unquote disappointed by in this episode, with the exception of Cecil not being a regular, was the fact that Ford wasn't in it very much. But you know what? That's okay.
Better without him.
It's okay because he is the type of person that would rather stay cooped up in his lab. And what I appreciate about him kind of taking a back seat in this one is that Mabel and Dipper, even though we're setting up the pieces for them to eventually kind of be driven apart and be driven apart from Uncle Stan, is that at this point they are still together and they are still behind him. And it was very, very moving to see that what he really wanted was to be somebody that they look up to.
And this whole episode, even though Ford wasn't actually on screen for very long, the whole episode was just dripping with his influence, starting with Stan wanting to do something that he didn't just want to have, you know,
by the way,
on his tombstone.
I want that light bulb
the light
he
bulb.
invented. Makes your skin smoother.
But we were out of light bulbs, so I invented my own. It'll last for 1,000 years and the light makes your skin softer. It's just like,
I am the man that's going to burn your house down with the lemons.
Same guy.
Yep.
It's just, how did he manage to do that in the time that Stan... I give up. And just... it really was showing a lot of comparison between the brothers and working on what we had built for Stanton about how he feels useless, and even, you know, Ford telling him at one point it'll be the only useful thing you ever do in your life. Just stuff like that. Still building on his feelings of inadequacy next to his ridiculous super genius brother. And so the whole running for mayor thing was just, I need to have something for me. I need to be more than just a grifter and the brother of the really smart dude. Yeah, and even if I die, make sure I have a bigger tombstone than Ford. Just like, really?
Well, for the longest time, you know, he's been so consumed by trying to save his brother that now that his brother's back and he's an old man, he's never, at least in my mind, he's never considered his legacy. Yeah. And now that his brother's is back and it's not what he was expecting, you know, what has he spent the last 30 years of his life doing?
His legacy is that he's a con man.
Yeah, his legacy is that he faked his death. He is, for all intents and purposes, a dead man to the world around him. So, you know, it's fun to see a character who's normally, like, you know, so sleazy but in the most lovable way.
Self-assured.
It's fun to see him get really introspective and start acting in accordance with that, but it's also really fun because you also do see the Mabel in him, but like the less personable Mabel, because he just starts saying stuff that, like, there is no connection between his brain and his mouth. Yeah, it's just straight what he's thinking. And on the one hand, I suppose you could say you admire his honesty.
It's like when you're making coffee and you put the beans or the grounds in, but you don't have a filter, and so it's all just... That's what it is.
verbal mess.
Verbal awful.
But
verbal awful.
But yeah, I do think it's funny that because he doesn't think about what he says, it didn't occur to him that he was being controlled. Like, that was the really funny thing, is that there's literally that little thought between what he says and what he's thinking. Which, I guess I don't know if that's a new development, because he's a man who's had so many secrets for so long.
The question is,
you have to have some sort of filter for that.
Is that being genuine, or is that just being what he thinks is charismatic?
That's true. Could be just that he's like, I'm a politician, because he's a salesman and can be a showman, but he also is really good at that because you get to insult the customers.
So it's either no thought, or it is so disconnected from how he actually feels. Either way, he just doesn't feel the being controlled thing. He just, boop, whatever.
Yep. And again, it's just really
the
fun.
world's ugliest neckties.
It really is.
And the name drop for the Reagan era.
Yeah, I was
Holy
not
cow.
expecting the degree of political commentary that we got in this episode. Although what I do appreciate,
that's for the adults.
Yeah, very much so. And for certain adults, it's probably not a joke a lot of Republicans appreciated. But the references to the Manchurian Candidate were great. And I actually really liked the nonsensical way the town charter lists how a mayor is picked.
Birdseed and the eagle kiss.
Well, the reason
speech.
The reason I like that is because it's actually, in a way, I think it's a throwback to the founder of Gravity Falls.
Oh yeah,
who was the president who was just off his rocker,
who elected a bunch of babies to his cabinet and preserved himself in peanut brittle. And,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So of course their town charter would have a really weird way of electing the mayor. A way that made no sense, but at the same time, oh look, an eagle did fly over and kiss him.
Well, and just Dipper reading it off a scroll and then ending it with, I couldn't make it up. I couldn't make this stuff up, guys.
I was going to say, what do you think, like, the brainstorming session for coming up with that looked like?
I honestly think that particular sequence of events happened once by crazy random happenstance. And Gravity Falls as a city just decided, yeah, that works.
There we go.
I honestly, and it was long enough ago for there to be even more rampant superstition and more rampant crazy stuff, because it was written on a scroll. Yeah. And so You know, if you're ridiculously superstitious and then something like that happens and you get freaking kissed by an eagle, okay. And then evidently, for some reason, it's a repeatable event in Gravity Falls every century? Half century?
Yeah.
There's a 102-year-old mayor, I mean.
Which,
who may or may not have been responsible for starting World War I?
Did he assassinate the Archduke? What happened there?
I just don't know.
I just don't understand. But, it is interesting because I think the first time we saw the mayor, what was that? The episode with Pacifica, correct? With the party.
Ancient Sins.
And I think they actually mentioned that he was not long for this world.
Yeah, he was 102 years old and he had buzzards floating around him.
That's
and the
right.
joke was just, they're with me.
And so, like, that's really funny foreshadowing. I honestly didn't think that.
Gravity Falls.
Yeah, I didn't.
Grappling Hook was 26 episodes of foreshadowing.
Exactly. I just didn't think that was going to be something that they called back to.
True.
So, again, well done,
Good
writers.
reason to have an election.
Oh, we should also probably mention the backwards message when Gideon possesses his father. It's evil spell, like spooky spell, or something like that. Which,
backwards.
The last time Gideon had a backwards message, it was just backwards message. So Gideon's backwards messages are probably the best backwards messages ever.
Because he's Gideon and he's useless.
Yeah, and is it me, or do you think like the kind of climax of this episode where Dipper and Mabel are dangling from the nose of the Mount Rushmore, didn't that feel a little bit like The Emperor's New Groove?
Little bit.
Little bit.
I'm okay with that.
I am too, and I love action hero Stan.
And it's always really good just to see, and for the whole city to see, you know, the debate's off, I have to go save my family, and for them to really see that even though he says all of these incredibly stupid, awful, offensive things, this is the guy he is at heart. That he dropped literally everything to go save his family.
Exactly. They're the most important thing to him, and again, you can't, no matter what he does, you can't deny that at the end of the day he loves his family and they mean the world to him.
I mean, he spent 30 years and had to learn physics and learn all these things from these books, do his own research to try to rebuild this crazy machine that had only been built once before by one person who went insane and one person who's gone.
And
to try and
both
get
of whom
his
were
brother,
geniuses.
to try and get his brother back. He's self-taught.
Which, again, considering the level of attention span that both he and Mabel have, and their aversion to anything intellectual, that's dedication and
to his family.
Exactly. He did what he had to do, and then in his eyes wasn't really rewarded for it. He was rewarded with a punch in the face and get out of my house. So, so it's, and I'll be honest.
Thanks, Ford. You're the jerk of the week.
Ever since the season premiere where he was just kicking zombie butt, I have adored action hero Stan. And I want to see more of it because when push comes to shove, he is a really cool action hero.
Well, even before that, we got it with the dinosaur one.
The Terran. Well, it's funny because he tells this story in that episode where he's built up to be, you know, this really muscly action hero. But then by the end of the episode, he is actually punching a dinosaur in the face. And, you know, when he stops trying so hard, he actually is the hero that, you know, he kind of imagines, he wishes he was. And, like, when with Mabel, with the thing that said our hero, and he's like, I'm not crying, it's confetti.
I have confetti in my eye. And the list of crimes, the reason he doesn't win is because they found his list of crimes. We're going to spend the rest of the broadcast reading them. Pug smuggling?
Pug trafficking.
Pug trafficking. I have some cheap pugs I need to move quickly.
Which, good on Gravity Falls for once making a good decision not to actually have a felon. Maybe not convicted.
He kind of is a convicted felon.
Well, okay, yeah, not having a convicted felon be their mayor. Both dodging a bullet with Gideon and dodging a bullet with Stan. Although we were talking about this before we started recording, it would have been very interesting to see what they would have done if he would have become mayor. For me, it's, I guess, slight spoilers for Parks and Recreation. I'm sorry. But it's
the statute of limitation on that one is passed. That was like season 4.
Yeah, but binge watching. It's like seeing Leslie Knope become city council member. It changes things, but
it's still Parks and Rec.
It still moves forward. The show still moves forward. The characters move forward, and they have the capacity for greater change, but there are still bigger obstacles that they have to overcome now.
But I guess that's too much of a shift in the status quo, and if you're changing up too many things, because what we got during the stinger, and it looked like it was just going to be a comedic stinger, but not so much, is that Gideon has drawn the sigil to summon Bill on the side of his cell wall, and it ends with, I'm ready to make a deal, and lights glowing. It's like, good job.
Which,
didn't you propose the last deal? Didn't you welch on that? Don't you think Bill will remember?
He did, but Bill also welched on the deal he made with Dipper, so neither of them hold up their end of the bargain, historically speaking. And you said that you were always really disappointed that there were no repercussions for Gideon calling off the deal.
And the Comic-Con, I actually asked Alex Hirsch about that at San Diego Comic-Con. I was that person. And it basically ended up, the bottom line was Bill buys. And that was the long and short of that, is that there aren't going to be any repercussions for that deal. He makes his own rules, and he may or may not follow them.
Which is very interesting, because you're absolutely right with a lot of supernatural entities. When they make a deal, they have to keep their word, like they are bound to it. But a lot of times they still try, they'll still find a way to turn it around to either make it a monkey's paw scenario or somehow make it work in their favor.
Yeah, they're lawful evil, but they're clever. Bill is chaotic evil.
Yeah,
essentially the definition of.
Which, again, makes sense in terms of why there are no repercussions for him.
Yeah.
So that's good to know in terms of where this could go, because both Gideon and Bill are liars, and although Bill has the power to back it up. Gideon's clever, but he's not powerful.
And he doesn't have the journal anymore.
Nor does he have the town
unless he's got
like
anymore. Half the pages stashed in his hair. I don't freaking know.
It's true. There could be. He could have
be more up there.
He could have
He's got
more
hyperspace hair.
Well, and he could have like put more in his clothes and then hid them under his bed. There could be more pages that he tore out before he was arrested. In the event that
going to the journals, going, what happened?
But yeah, could you imagine if he also does seem to be the type of person that would skim through the book, take the most powerful and dangerous spells out, and always keep them on his person in the event that something happened to him.
He's also a power at any cost kind of person.
Exactly. And it was one thing when he thought he was the only one with power. Then he probably didn't have to be cautious. But the second
he found out about Dipper,
exactly, then you have to change your strategy a little bit. So yeah,
he's back. And we saw in the sizzle reel, we saw Dipper reading something called the cipher file, and we saw a bill-shaped crop circle.
That's gonna be fun. So yeah, I guess that kind of wraps it up for this episode. It was so good. It's
got a good way to wrap. Good night.
Night Vale.
Good night. I feel like that should have been Good Night, Gravity Falls. Good night. But we tried.
We did. Anyway, guys. Yeah, that basically wraps it up for this episode. But guys, we are coming to, we're doing 2 episodes of Scream tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that to make up for the fact that I was gone in Japan. I apologize.
And I don't do these on my own.
But we'll be doing a 2-fer, and Scream is coming to an end fairly soon. The first season is coming to an end, and Gravity Falls' schedule is very
wonky,
intermittent. I suppose you could say.
So it's going to be another couple weeks before we have another episode.
Well, in terms of Gravity Falls, what I want to know though is that originally I created this show because I want to talk about horror movies. So I definitely have a few in mind that I really want to talk about, but I also want to know what you guys want to hear about. What horror movies do you want to hear me talk about? I'll be alone on most of them. Sorry.
There's a few where it's like, sure, I'll sit my butt down and talk about them, but for the most part, it's just like.
But like there are definitely ones I want to talk about, like the recent ones, like It Follows and The Babadook, and I also want to talk about my personal favorites, like the Scream franchise, like the Nightmare on Elm Street series, and The Descent, which is amazing. So things like that. But I would also love to talk about stuff that I haven't seen. So please leave your suggestions in the comment below. Let us know what you thought of this episode of Gravity Falls. And yeah.
Backwards messages.
Backwards messages. Katie, where can people find you if they want to find out what you're up to these days?
You can find me on Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram at Kiaxet. That's Kiaxet.
And in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at TheMenguin. That's TheMenguin. We will see you guys tomorrow night for Scream, the double feature. Yay! See you guys then.